Have you ever wanted to learn how to play the bass guitar but weren't sure where to begin? I've got you. In this video I'll be covering 5 things every bassist needs to know when starting out and some tips to get you moving in your musical journey. Stick around. Hey everyone, welcome to Jack of All Staves, where we teach the skills you need to be successful on your musical journey on drums, bass, guitar, piano, and the theory that binds them. My name is Robert, and we're going to jump right into those 5 things you need to know to get started on the bass. It probably goes without saying that it's hard to learn how to play the bass if you don't have a bass. So if you have one, great. If you don't, I posted some links in the description below to help you find some basses that might be a good fit for you to get started. So the first thing you need to know about the bass are the main parts. Up here, we have the body of the bass, which is this large portion here. This houses the pickups, which, as their name suggests, it picks up the sound of strings vibrating, and that puts it through to a jack that gets connected with a cord to an amplifier to make the sound loud enough for us to actually hear, because without this it just sounds kind of dinky. We have these knobs here as well, and your bass might have more or less than this. These control which pickups are being used, at what volume, and some other tone aspects, but that's not super important when you're just starting out. Down here we have the spots that the strings come through, and they go all the way up to the top here. This area here the strings goes past is called the neck. That also houses frets that go perpendicular to the neck. This top part where the strings connect is the head of the bass, and these are the tuning pegs. They can be loosened or tightened, and that changes the pitch of the string that sounds. So if I have a string like this, I can make it go down in pitch by loosening it, or I can make it go up in pitch by tightening it. The second thing you should know are the names of the open notes. Open means that my left hand's not touching the strings, I'm just playing them with my right hand. The lowest pitched note on most basses is the E string. The second one up from that is the A string. The third is the D string. And the fourth is the G string. Now if you have a bass that has more than 4 strings, usually if it's a 5-string bass you have a B lower than the E string, and if you have a 6-string bass you have a C higher than the G string. In case you're a theory person, it's usually tuned in ascending fourths. So these notes sound pretty low in pitch, and so if you're looking at a piano, the notes would be towards the left-hand side, which has those really low rumbly notes. E, A, D, and G. The third thing you have to know is that the right hand is responsible for initiating the sound or creating the attack of the notes. And of course this is different if you're left-handed and have a left-handed bass, but I'm going to talk about standard basses for the moment. For most general playing on the bass, you'll be using 2 fingers. We have finger 1 and finger 2 on the right hand. And these will alternate to play notes. It's important to learn where to put your right hand. Usually when I'm playing, I'll kind of rest my thumb gently on the body and it will follow my fingers across the strings. A lot of people will just rest their thumb on a pickup and play like that. Whatever you do, it's important to make sure that you are alternating fingers at first. So pulling through, finger 2, 1, 2, 1. You can also do 1, 2, 1, 2. It doesn't really matter which finger you start with. Whatever works for you is fine as long as you're working on using those 2 because it's going to help you in the long run. Now the fourth thing to keep in mind on the bass is that the left hand is mostly in charge of determining what note is played. If you're playing an open note with your right hand, that's one thing. But if you want to play anything besides those 4 open strings, you have to use your left hand to change the pitch. And we do that by pressing down gently in front of these frets. So each fret, if you think of a piano keyboard, is like taking the note that's right adjacent to the previous note. So if I have an E here, I'm moving up a half step, another half step, another half step, and so on all the way up that string. And so if I want to play whatever note, I have to know which fret played will determine which note sounds out. When you're learning how to play with your left hand on the bass, it's important to learn where to press down to get the best sound. If you press down directly on top of a fret, you can get sometimes kind of a rattly sound like that. Right in front of it doesn't quite get the right sound. You just get that sort of weird sense there. So the best place is right behind it. And if I get that, I'm going to get a pretty clear sound whatever note I'm playing. Okay, so we talked a bit about the right hand initiating sound and the left hand determining pitch. The fifth thing to know about the bass, though, is that they have to learn how to be independent but synchronized. That was a C major scale, and if you notice, I was able to play it one note at a time. One thing you have to make sure you're doing on the bass is not only synchronizing, I'm playing my left hand on the C note, my right hand is plucking, left hand on the D note, right hand is plucking, left hand on the E note, right hand is plucking, and so on. I also have to make sure that I'm not letting each note keep on ringing out. So it's important to work on playing one note at a time, but it's also really important to make sure that the other 3 strings you don't want to play are being somehow silenced or muted so that they're not sounding out at the same time. Because it can be really frustrating when you're trying to play, you play a D here, and then I want to play a C here. That D is still sounding out, and it doesn't quite sound as clean as I want it to. So just as both hands are responsible to create a sound or create a note, both hands also have a role in making sure that they're playing cleanup to make sure no unwanted notes are sounding out at the wrong time. The right hand can do this pretty well by itself when it's going from a lower string to a higher string. If I'm playing on the E string, and then I want to jump to the A string, I'm actually pulling back, and when I pull back on the A string, it simultaneously silences this low E string here. And when I play out, I kind of move my hand around with my floating thumb, so my thumb is actually kind of resting on these strings beneath the one I'm playing. But when I come back down, I have a problem. And that's where my left hand comes in. If I'm coming down from the top string here, and I move to this string here, I need to use my left hand to come and gently touch the top string so it stops vibrating, so it stops making sound. And the same thing when I go from my D to my A, my left hand gently touches up here, and then from the A to the E, same thing. I'm gradually moving across to make sure that there's no sound being wrung out that shouldn't be being wrung out that can make my sound muddier. Now, if you're like me and you're just starting out, all of this can sound pretty overwhelming. It's not hard concepts, but actually doing it with your fingers can feel like it's miles away, and I get that. We've all been there. But one thing I tell people all the time is that this is not hard, it's just unfamiliar. We perceive things as hard if we haven't had a chance to become familiar with them. We become familiar by repetition. Repetition is the father of learning and the mother of mastery. And the more we repeat things, especially slowly at first to get some idea of how we're doing it, the more our brains create strong neural connections with our muscles to be able to make the correct movements at the correct times. And over time, that becomes so second nature that we don't even think about it. If you are playing basketball and you've been doing it for a long time, you don't often think, you just act. That comes with time, and it's no different for the bass, and it's learnable and it's doable for anyone if you put the work in. So I have a couple of very foundational exercises that can kind of get you along this process. The first exercise focuses mostly on playing open notes and getting used to how they feel and how to get comfortable playing them. So if my right hand comes and plays the low E string, I'm just going to get comfortable playing that. Your left hand, if you want, can start gently resting on the other 3 strings, the A string, D string, and G string, to make sure that they're not starting to ring out, because sometimes they can kind of start ringing by themselves. And when you feel comfortable with that, move to the A string. And you should be pulling with your right hand fingers into the E string, which should silence it, or my right hand thumb is following along, so I can't make it not do that anymore. Then to the D string, and each time I go, I'm moving my left hand a little bit to make sure that I'm not dampening that sound. You have to get used to making sure that you're letting each string ring out. And don't worry about timing so much right now, just worry about getting that feel. Then the G string. When you feel comfortable with that, start working your way back down, and your left hand will have to silence that G string. If I move down to the A string, see how both those are sounding out? I have to silence my D string. And then as I move to the E string, I silence my A string. So a little faster, just for repetition. If I do 4 notes for each string, 1, 2, 3, 4, A, D, G, and then on my way back down, my left hand is playing a role in cleanup. Once you get the feeling for playing those 2 hands together that way, it's good to start learning how to play actual notes on the frets. I've seen a lot of people when they start to play bass, since they mostly just play 1 note at a time, they'll just kind of clump their hands together like a club here and play like that. Again, there are worse things in the world, but if you're going to start playing an instrument, it's good to start playing it in a way that's going to set you up for success in the future. And that means that, for the most part, the rule is 1 finger per fret. On the left hand on guitar and on bass, there are 4 fingers we talk about. First finger, second finger, third finger, fourth finger. My thumb is behind the neck, and I'll just press down and get used to pressing down on the frets. My first finger plays the first fret, second finger plays second fret, third finger plays third fret, fourth finger plays fourth fret. Oftentimes people have one finger that's weaker than the other ones. For a long time that was my ring finger. For some people it's their pinky. But just keep on working at it one little bit at a time. And then when you feel comfortable on that string, you can go to D string. Make sure you're silencing strings you don't want to have ring out. Pointer finger. 3, 4. If you find that playing 1 finger per fret just isn't manageable in this lower register where they're more spread apart for you right now, then it's also acceptable in this lower area especially to play the first finger on the first fret, second finger on the second fret, and instead of using the third finger on the third fret, you can simply use your fourth finger there. So it would sound like this. And then the same thing here. A string, E string. Now I think the ideal is to work towards this stretch, but for some people it's just not manageable in that lower area. When you get up on the higher frets, it's a little easier because they're more closely spaced together, so that's more manageable. But down here, if you simply need to use 3 fingers instead of 4 for those frets, that is acceptable too. If you work on these exercises consistently, then pretty soon you're going to start feeling like you're actually making the sound the way you want and not letting strings ring out that shouldn't be ringing out. And it's going to start feeling a bit more like second nature. And once that foundation is laid, it's going to make it much easier to keep on building on it, moving forward, playing more musical things rather than just technical things. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and sign up for notifications to keep up with what we're doing going forward. Also be sure to leave a comment with anything you'd like me to talk about in a future video. Thanks again. Have a great day.